Like many businesses, today's clubs face a tough reality when competing for top talent. As you know, not only are you competing with other private clubs for people, you are also competing with any business that offers a competitive wage, either salary or hourly. And on top of that, clubs need people who can deliver a memorable member experience and treat members like they're actually family. In this episode, my guest is Meridith Picarelli-Khattar, who has over 20 years of club management, most recently as the interim GM at the Chevy Chase Club just outside of Washington, D.C. She has credentials as a certified club manager and certified chief executive. She represents a new generation of club leaders who knows that creating exceptional member experiences and member retention starts with taking care of your team. In this episode, we talk about competing in today's job market and why supporting working families isn't just the right thing to do. It's become essential for the success of all businesses, including private clubs. You're listening to Crushing Club Marketing, a podcast for progressive club leaders ready to increase their club's revenue. Time for change begins right now. Meredith, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
Oh, it's
excited
good
to be here.
Yeah, and I love the conversation. I think just leadership in general at clubs is one of those things that is evolving, especially as the landscape changes and club members change, and for sure a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, which is that it's hard to create a memorable, unique member experience if you don't have people that can actually deliver on it, rather than it's more than just a warm body, right? I mean, and you've seen that over the years. I mean, how much has it changed in your, from your perspective, in your experience, the hiring and how that's evolved?
Yeah. Oh, it's vastly changed. And even just coming out of COVID, I think everyone's experienced that the pool of candidates has shrunk, and there's lots of different opportunities and industries people can go into outside of hospitality. And so we really have to talk about and figure out how clubs are promoting themselves to be a great work environment and to provide great benefits to those that work here, as opposed to, the McDonald's down the street that may pay the same as what someone may get paid here.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I mean, years ago, we did work for a client of ours who was a call center, like, like answering service almost, right? And they're like, hey, we're not competing against call centers. We're competing against anyone that pays $15 an hour. And I'm like, it just opened my eyes, and the emphasis on, recruiting videos and things like that we see in our work. But from your perspective, like how can a club's commitment to these topics, to benefits, to work-life balance, how can that help them in what is a very competitive world out there, workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ed. And I think from our perspective here, we don't just look at what other clubs are offering. I think we have to look from an industry standard, what across industries they're offering to their team as benefits. And it's not just from a financial standpoint, what people are getting paid. Here in DC, it's free parking, which sounds silly, but when you're paying for parking, when you have to go to work, it's a really nice perk. It's looking at a generous paid time off policy, parental leave policies, pet insurance, flexible scheduling, mental health resources. I think it is a lot to look at when you want to become a top employer, but you also have to look at what other businesses and employers are doing to really attract good talent.
It seemed like in the past, I mean, maybe this is just in my, fantasy mind, but like that almost like people who worked at clubs were in a different like world than employees in other industries, or, I mean, you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know, maybe that's because so many people in private clubs will stay in those roles for a long time. But people that are entering the job market today have got so many options that way, right? I mean, and that's kind of what I hear you saying. I mean, the things you just mentioned are things you just have to be competitive with as an employer.
Yeah, you do. And I also think, newer employees these days, it's not so much again about what they're being paid. Yes, they want to be able to live, but what's the culture that they're joining? Is there a flexible environment for them? And does it really match with not only where they want to be in life, right, but with their own perspective and culturally, does it fit?
Hmm.
Whereas I think way back and even before COVID, we had a lot of transition through COVID. You had employees that stayed in their roles for a really long time in private clubs. And
Hmm.
so, we have really had to, and I think all clubs had to reevaluate how you're going to attract good people and what does that look like. And so part of it is the culture, who you are, what you offer, and, those benefits that add to their experience here.
Hmm.
Professional development, education.
Right. For clubs, are there policies that are fairly easy to change? I mean, I know that, and I don't think this is a matter of changing bylaws necessarily, but really, I mean, if, as clubs as employers, culture is hard to change. We
Mhm.
know that, right? But it probably starts with that. Or how do you see that? Are there policies that can change, or how you approach or clubs approach certain things that doesn't require a full on, culture reset?
Yeah, I think, right, when I think about culture, it is how you really value your people and how you value those that are going to, work for you, and help create that memorable experience. And so is the environment that you are promoting a culture that you value the team members that work here, um, versus just giving them benefits to attract them to be, here at the club or working at your business. And, from a policy standpoint, you know, none of the policies and maybe some clubs, they need to be approved by the board. But if you're changing your PTO policy, if you're adding a parental leave policy plan, a lot of those are coming and being spearheaded internally. And again, they may have a financial kind of component and budget requirement, but not necessarily kind of a change in a policy or a bylaw.
Got it. Look, can I just take you down a side road that we
Yeah.
weren't really planning on talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just because I think it's so important and it starts with leadership
Yeah.
is culture
Uh-huh.
and the mindset of, I mean, because when you even get down to policy, in different, like you talked about pet insurance, right? And it's like it is sort of a culture thing. It really is like, creating a work environment that people want to be a part of because that culture is better. And I don't care if they don't pay as much, but it can make a difference. Well, someone once said to me, well, it's a Maya Angelou things. People don't, care about what you say or do. It's about how you make them
Mhm.
feel. And it really does apply in this way. I mean, have you seen that? And is that, from your experience in the club industry, especially?
Yeah. I mean, we're in the hospitality industry and we're in, and I tell all of our new hires, the hospitality industry is the people industry. And so I hope you like people when you come to work here, because you will interact with people no matter what role that you're in. And it's all about the people. And our job as leaders is to create an employee experience that they can in turn create that for the members. And so you have to look at how am I creating a hospitality experience for our staff and making them feel that they're the most important people here. So then that translates directly to the membership.
Yeah, for sure. This is not a just, I want to be clear that because my next question, I don't want people to start thinking, this is a DEI
Yeah.
podcast episode
Yeah.
because it really isn't.
Yeah.
However, I do think that especially with the face of members, and I don't mean like race and ethnicity as much as just like generationally,
Mhm.
in the needs and of how a younger generation
Mhm.
and their expectations are different than someone who's maybe a little bit older. But from a leadership team perspective,
Mhm.
from what you've seen, how important do you think it is to have that, a diverse set of people with different interests, on that leadership team, or whether that's management or the board?
Yeah, absolutely. we have in many clubs, you'll have generations of members, and you'll see lots of young new families starting, and you're really trying to serve a multi-generational environment. And the more individuals you have that have right, may have a different expectation of what I'd like to see with a small child than maybe a family that are in their 60s or 70s and have children out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does that experience look like? And so having a diverse team, not only in age, but in backgrounds, to be able to share, here's what I would expect if I was a club member, here's what I would be looking for, right, from that standpoint. It just helps us kind of redefine what that experience for members looks like. And I think also from a board perspective, when you're looking at programming and the addition of facilities and amenities throughout time, having kind of a diverse board that I can understand the needs of what they would want and put it into perspective as like those groups of members, what they would want from their experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really helpful to kind of define really where you're going.
Mm-hmm. And even what you're saying, though, that the diverse backgrounds is the one thing that you said that just really, got me thinking about how when you're hiring or when you're trying to attract a team of people,
Mm-hmm.
or even more so now, like just a level of empathy to know that when you're hiring people, these are the things that they might be facing that,
Right.
as a leadership team or for sure as a board, you
Mm-hmm.
may not really be familiar with. And I mean, my gosh, the world is changing
Yeah.
so quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting when I think about the whole idea of the needs of people entering the workforce today.
Yep.
It seems to me that there is a level of, and I think I may have alluded to this earlier, that, people, it's easy for, especially people who are my age, wear this like old school, mentality like a badge of honor, like this is how it has to be.
Right.
And yet, the world will tell them a different thing when people don't come to work at those places because they're
Right.
like, what? That's not, so for the clubs, I mean, how important is it that clubs recognize this and really start to adapt to that?
It's vastly important, and even just from not only from a staff perspective but a membership perspective. And so things aren't going to be what they always were, right? But you have to learn to be able to cater to your multi-generational membership, right,
Mhm.
and your multi-generational staff and diverse staff, and celebrate the differences of what we have. And I think as clubs look to move forward, you really want to embrace your history, right? And not lose what you've done in the past, but
Mhm.
you've got to figure out how you're moving forward. And I'm not going to call it modernizing because I don't right think that's the right word, but how you're moving forward and, keeping your traditions and your history, while celebrating your future. And so how
Mhm.
are you moving forward to do that?
Right, because that adaptation is
Mhm.
critical.
Yeah.
To keep your longtime members really engaged and happy, and then also making sure it's working with, you know. Let's just talk about life issues too, because what I've seen at some clubs is a golf staff that might be larger than others in the past
Mhm.
because they may have more flexibility with days off and more time to spend with family, and to the point of retaining your top people.
Right.
To me it seems like look, hospitality is really hard,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hard on families, and it's difficult, and unlike in the past, there are more families that two income families.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just loved your take on what you see and what clubs maybe want to recognize that they haven't in that way, especially if they're like the old school, you got
Right.
to work crazy hours.
Yeah, I think you'll get people get to a point, right, and some of our newer employees coming out of college, entering the workforce, for them, working 12 hours a day is not what they're looking to do anymore. And so the workforce, unfortunately, will shrink if we just narrow ourselves to saying we can only hire this amount of people and here's your role and that's it. These are the hours you work, or you have to stay until the end of the event, and without having a little bit more flexibility. I think not only do, new hires and younger, the younger generation is looking for more of a balance, but I think coming out of COVID, many more people are looking for that balance. And so
Mhm.
what does that look like and how can you do it? And it could be hiring an additional staff member. It could be looking at hours of operations and being a little bit more flexible with what that scheduling looks like.
I mean, you've worked so closely on the operational side at Chevy Chase, and I'm just wondering, like, how does that work out from a financial perspective?
Mhm.
It's like, as a business owner, I get the idea of like, hey, get those guys, put them on a salary, and work them to death. But if you say, well, no, 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 let's just have more people that maybe work shorter days or less. I mean, it would seem that like that's not really just really sustainable. But what are some models that you've seen that actually say, no, this is how it can work?
Yeah, here at Chevy, I think we've been really fortunate. I have worked at clubs where 12 to 14-hour days were a standard. And I think when I first came here a decade ago, it was 9 or 10 hour, right? I'll call them shifts, but that was really what your day was. And I thought, wow, it's like a vacation. I have all these hours back in my day, and it felt much more manageable, right? It felt like I had much more balance to be able to do something outside of work. And it was just here. We have many more layers just because of how large our operation is. But even adding, right, manager and development program, interns, supervisory interns, and trying to provide support or cross training managers so that they can support others in other departments.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really important. Not only grows, those managers or those staff members, but it also helps others be able to take a break and maybe not
Mhm.
have to work all of those days. So at a club that maybe couldn't afford to just add, or wasn't able to support it on the due side to add another employee, I think there's other ways to look at it.
Yeah.
One of those being cross training others, having supervisory roles, and maybe supplementing having a manager and development program or an internship program as well.
Some of those things, you don't have to be the size of Chevy Chase to be able to pull off some of those things. I mean, but it is a commitment. It really is helping to identify your best people, I would
Right.
imagine, right? And leveraging that as much as you can. I'd love to just talk a little bit about some things that are really close to you. I mean, you have done a lot of public speaking and or speaking at industry events about for women who are having going to have a child or
Mhm.
considering having a child, and we all know, and there are a lot of young men and women in the workforce today, and I'm just wondering what was done at Chevy Chase to accommodate that, and what are some of the real practical strategies that clubs can consider
Yeah.
for their teams?
Yeah, thank you, Ed. It's a great question, very near and dear to my heart. Really, for me, it took me a very long time to figure out how I could have a family in this industry, and I've seen so many young women leave the industry, and gentlemen too, over time because they just couldn't figure out how to make it work. And I have interns ask me all the time, you have a small child. How do you make it work? How does it with work life balance? And um, sometimes it's work life integration and it's not so much a balance, but I think it is just such an important topic. And here at Chevy, when I was here about a decade ago, there weren't many young managers who had families. And then I came back, and almost right every manager had a couple of kids, and was able to work and um, have a successful career. And so there wasn't any hesitation when I thought, okay, well, I can do this. um, and I had to set a lot of firm boundaries about, okay, well, fortunately, I should say, my schedule is flexible, and so I'm able to manage it from that standpoint. But early on, it was very difficult. So We didn't at the time have a parental leave program. I, figured out how much time I could carry over between vacation and um, sick pay. And we have a very generous PTO program. And so I had a good amount, and then was able to take 12 weeks off and then kind of jumped back in thinking I could do the same things I did before. And it was a really big eye opener that because nobody came to me and said, well, let's reintroduce you back into the workforce. Let's look at what's on your plate. I just kind of came back to work and thought I could do right the same things that I was doing before. And just leaving a small child at 14 weeks old, right, or 12 weeks old and coming back to work is hard enough. And then trying to figure out how that all works. And so I went through it and I had to set some boundaries, right? If I have to do pickup, I have to leave at 5 o'clock, right? It'll take me an hour to get home. Or if I'm doing drop off, right, the earliest I can be here is a little after 8 a.m. And so I figured out with my meetings and worked out with my husband how we make it work. But there was no one at the time who really helped me through the process.
Hmm.
And I thought, this has to be made easier for women and men in particular, in
Hmm.
general, about how do you prepare your teams for your leave, right? And tools that you can provide to them so that they can be successful, and then how you kind of re-enter the workplace after you've taken leave. And then from there, what programs should be in place. I immediately thought, well, I was so fortunate to be able to take all this time off, but maybe if I was a line level staff that didn't have all this vacation time, could I afford to take all this time off? And right, we say 12 weeks is what family medical leave covers to hold your job, but 12 weeks isn't even enough time.
Hmm.
And so I started to think about what we could do differently. And I think that's why I've started to speak a little bit more to try and help, clubs prepare, um, and other young women who are expecting, try to prepare themselves so they can come back and almost right provide something to their employer about here's how I'd like this to work.
Hmm.
Um, and since then, we've actually had, I put together more recently a parental leave program or plan that was approved by our executive committee, and we're just making a couple of amendments to it. And so I think we'll have that live. The goal is for October 1. And so I'm really proud of that the club has adopted that. And I think you're starting to see more clubs do so. And it's just figuring out, how that works.
Um, and they have to. It seems like something they just have to figure out. Can you just maybe? I'm trying to. I don't know if there's an easy way for you to kind of share some of the things that were added, and if not, and I totally get that as being proprietary
Sure.
information for the club, but at the same time, like, how hard is that? Like, I I listen to you and I think the courage that it takes, especially for young people, to say, I like my job and I want to have a family, but I'm afraid if I say anything or I ask her, then I might lose my job, or I might not have a job when I'm
Yeah.
after. I mean, it's like, can you just talk about maybe what that's like? Because I don't know that a lot of guys have that same. I mean, truly, I mean, God bless the guys who do, but I know I'm a caveman, so.
Um, Fortunately, I felt very supportive. Luca Boyle was the general manager here at Chevy, and he was very easy to share it with, and it was really exciting. And so there was no hesitation that my job would be on the line, or I wouldn't have a job when I came back, or I couldn't take the time off. I came to him and I had a plan, and I had already outlined, as I said, I just want to share. I'm expecting, and here's what the plan looks like for me. I plan to take the full 12 weeks, and here's who has all my responsibilities, during the time that I'm out.
Hmm.
And I was fully supported, and I feel really fortunate for that because, I did, Rachel Black and I did a presentation at a conference last year, and we actually surveyed a number of women within CMAA about taking parental leave and or having children and coming back into the workforce, and many of them said that they were very intimidated to share with their boss that they were expecting and they were going to start a family, and they felt some dismissed them. Some were supportive, some were not. And, I think that's really difficult. It's hard enough as a woman trying to say, I want to start a family. How do I do this? And how do I juggle for then not to receive support back from, your employer or kind of where you're working. So um, I think to keep women in this industry, we just have to find a way to support families. And, I don't only think women. I had recently, our aquatics director just welcomed his first child with his wife in March. And I suggested to him, I said, take as much time off as you'd like. Let me know if you'd like to, how you want to come back. Do you want to come back 4 days a week, work 1 day a week from home? I want to be able to support your family because I don't want you to come to me and tell me, I don't think I can do this anymore. This job doesn't work and fit in my family life.
Mhm.
And so we just have to be adaptable if we want, if you want to have good people working in your industry and keep good people, you've just got to be able to be a little flexible and adaptable.
So this goes right back to leadership stuff to me, which is
Mhm.
that it's a totally different thing to just have lip service, just to say, "Oh yeah, yeah, we do that. Yep,
Yeah.
yeah, we," but it's living it and having that example, so that one person who, my gosh, I went and I talked to Luke, and he
Yeah.
was amazing.
Yeah.
Then other people say, "Oh, it's good to know,"
Yeah.
because if it came back that Luke was, oh my gosh, he was really mad, and
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, he said he was fine, but you could just tell. I mean, that's culture, and it
Yeah.
it does start from the top in that way,
Yes.
and it's not easy to change.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's not. And I was so thankful, right, to be able to know that he was genuinely happy.
Yeah,
And not just for me, right, for our family. And he would do the same thing for all of our, for all of our employees. So
yeah.
we have to celebrate it. And then we, have to, as, the supporters, figure out how to make it work for them and their families and provide additional support and resources.
Yeah, and I think that, to that, happy also, and when I hear that, I'm happy for the industry in a lot of ways too, because like you need that. And and what happens in my experience at least is then people say, "Well, good, now I know it's going to happen, who I can lean on when
Yeah.
I'm gone."
Yeah.
And that's so important. And I mean, let's face it, it's like, you say we need more women in the industry. It's like, my gosh, like, you think about the way the world is right now, and like we were saying, two income families, and you're right, you do, and the irony that I think is so interesting about the whole thing is that, how many clubs we talked. I love this. I love this line from clubs because everyone says it. What makes you so different? Well, we're like a second family for our members. We're, our staff, we're all like, a second family. And it's like, let's start acting like a
Yeah.
second family, and really doing those things. And a lot of clubs do. I know that too. It's not like
Yeah.
they don't. So, but
Mhm.
it's not always easy, and change isn't easy. But in that spirit, with the demographic changing, knowing, I think that in Golf Life Navigators mid-year report that
Mhm.
Jason Becker shared,
Yeah.
it was sort of interesting, and they do a lot of residential golf community stuff. But there's a note about how more spouses, the female spouse in
Mhm.
the relationship, are making the decisions,
Mhm.
in general.
Yeah.
And how important do you? I mean, I think I know what you're going to say, but the emphasis is really on the fact that women in leadership roles are important in
Mhm.
clubs as it relates to how the families are changing, the
Yeah.
dynamics in two income families, and a lot of times the spouse, the wife, is a breadwinner.
Mhm.
How are you seeing that, and what's your perspective on how important that is for clubs to have more women in leadership roles?
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing, right, not only, dual families working and women taking, larger positions from a membership standpoint, right? But most women are also the CEO of the household. And so they're making the decisions right at home and then doing all the planning for the families, social engagements, kids' activities. And just from a perspective of, even coming back and, putting on the cap of, if I were a member of this club, right, with a 3-year-old child, what would I want? And right, it is, or why aren't members coming to our fitness center? Well, we don't offer daycare. And I know that's not something we're looking at, but if you want to attract an age group of moms for a fitness class, maybe you should schedule a youth program at the same time so they can drop their kids off, or a tennis activity for youth. We do kind of a Friday night cocktails once a month. And then we also do games on the green or a movie night. And so the kids can have their own activity while the adults have, a nice evening out for themselves.
Mhm.
And so I think it's trying to pair that together and then developing programs that you think the families are going to want that keep them here at the club at the same time. So there's something for mom and dad, and then there's something for, the kids to do as a family or separately, right?
Mhm.
But bringing them to the club. And even when you go through, and that's why having a diverse leadership team is so important, because some they're going to come up with ideas that they would want, right, if they were a member here, or
Right.
that they would see. And even just our aquatics director, having his first child, and me talking about going to, mommy and me swim lessons with my son. We developed a program and it was full this summer. And so,
Mhm.
right, those ideas come out of the activities that we do, with our own families,
Right.
or that we see the need for, um, to give back.
Yeah. So often people will say though, it's like, well, I don't want our club to become a daycare summer camp thing, um, and yet, like I think about, especially family clubs.
Yeah.
You're not saying you have to have a daycare, but
Yeah.
the idea. I think that one of the areas for people to embrace and trust also is the fact that your leaders are not going to steer you down a path that's not aligned with your brand and who
Right.
you are. Because I think that, don't you think that's the fear sometimes that people have? It's like, oh, well, I don't want to. We're not going to become a resort.
Right. Yeah, and I would agree. And that's why you have, I mean, a variety of committees, and you have a variety of members on those committees, but then you'll have from a professional standpoint, you can help guide them on, keeping within your mission and vision of your club. And we here at Chevy talk a lot about kind of who we are. We have a member mission and vision, and then we have an employee mission and vision. And so living that mission and vision and making decisions based on that. So you may not have to have a daycare, but it doesn't mean you can't align an adult activity with a children's activity so that you could bring families together, families to the club, but they can have a different experience.
Yeah, I love that. I
Um,
love the fact that you have a member mission and vision as well as a staff. Are they pretty? Like, how different are those two?
yeah, so the member mission and vision really talks about kind of who we are as a club, what the member standpoint
Sure.
stand for, why the club was kind of founded
Yeah.
for recreation, for social engagement, to continue having wonderful facilities, and then from a staff perspective, and also being respectful of their environment, respectful of others. And then from a staff perspective, it talks about, right, as professionals, this is who we are.
Hmm.
And everyone here, we consider us professionals. And so you may be a tennis professional or a server that's a professional, right? You are considered a professional. And
Hmm.
this is what we seek to do, and the experience we seek to provide to the members.
Hmm.
We redeveloped our mission statement for our employees a couple of years ago with the senior leadership team, and then really adopted the acronym PRIDE. So taking personal responsibility and delivering excellence. And so we talk a lot about that kind of with the team, that it's really your responsibility to create that exceptional experience for the membership. And from a senior leadership standpoint, it's our responsibility to make sure we're creating that for our staff.
Hmm. Interesting. And you know what? Like, I love listening to I don't know. I love that stuff. But you don't have to be a big club to have really strong mission and vision and core values. Like you don't. And right. I mean,
No,
that's
it helps you, though, right, inform the decisions and kind of have a focus on the purpose of why you're here. I worked with our team at the field club when I was there, and we developed our own kind of employee mission statement. And that was just what we talked about. When we talked about we want to do this event or trying to make decisions as a team, we went back to our mission statement that, the team helped create of why
Mhm.
we were here. And it just talks about what your purpose is. And
Mhm.
I feel when it goes, and that kind of goes back to why people join organizations. Why do you want to work here versus working at the McDonald's or maybe at another club. Maybe our values are different and maybe
Right.
they align a little bit more with who you are as a person.
Right. And when you're able to connect those values back to the programs, the policies, the things that you're offering to your employees to make their experience better,
Right.
it's all aligned and way more meaningful, and your board's aligned as well. And it's one of those things, Meredith, for whatever reason, I think people have a tendency to poo-poo and go, yeah, yeah, we have a mission statement. Yeah, yeah. But without that real commitment to it and making it very unique, it's easy to get lost
Yeah.
for sure. Do you see this? I don't know. You probably know the stats as far as the number of women in GM roles nationally in private clubs. Do you know what that is?
I do. CMAA was very kind to provide that last year to me. So about 14.6 women hold general manager roles kind of within CMAA.
So 14% for roughly, have those roles. Is
Yeah.
that is that higher or lower than maybe what you would have thought before you saw the number?
I think it's lower than what I thought of where we would be in kind of 2025. And, especially because we have, over 60% of student CMA members are women. And so there's a lot of women coming into the industry. But how much of that is translating, right? And them staying in the industry to get to the general manager level.
So it's funny because when you say those numbers, 14% actually was higher than what I thought it might
Okay.
be. But when you say 60% that are entering the industry are women,
Yeah.
that's kind of staggering. So I mean, it sort of illustrates the point, and it's like, you want to keep, I mean, these are people who want to be in this industry and want to be engaged in it, and for whatever reason exit or not reaching those leadership
Yeah.
roles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my guess is probably not because they're not capable,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
they just, choose over time. And we've had plenty of interns kind of over the course of my career and early managers in their career leave just because it wasn't, they couldn't do the hours or didn't want to do the hours, the nights, the weekends, right? And
Right.
tried to figure out how does this work with having a life outside of here or starting a family?
Does that ever concern you? And I look at it from, I was a TV sportscaster
Mhm.
for a dozen years or whatever. And it seems like today there are fewer people going into that line of work in general because they're like, what? You make how much and you got to start where? It's like, no, I'll go do something else. I don't want to do it that badly. Does that kind of concern you that people might start looking at that? These young kids coming out in hospitality that, these student CMAA kids that are like, what? No, I'm not doing that job.
I mean, I think that's why it's so important for clubs to start to adapt, right? And start to really look at the workforce and what not only students out of school are looking for, but what their current team is looking for, and just being able to adapt and being a little bit more flexible.
Do you think that becomes a competitive advantage at some point for clubs to have female leadership?
I do. You're seeing a lot more. So it goes back to how are you making this industry uh, making it work for women who want to have families. And when you get to the top, you have a little bit more control of your schedule, but you don't want someone to leave as they're kind of coming through.
Yeah.
You still want them to be excited about the industry, and I think there's definitely an advantage. And we have different qualities, different aspects of leadership that we bring, the way we see things, how we interact with people, both from an employee and a membership side, and then just taking into account each of our own challenges that maybe women have had to try and attract and get more women to stay in the industry.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's like just just to riff off that really briefly is that um, in some cases it's a lot better. I know that many times in my conversations in my household,
Yeah.
the caveman doesn't really see a better way. But really, the combination in a lot of cases of like, hey, what about this as an alternative? And so as I like to say, none of us is smarter than all of us, but
Mhm.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Meredith, I really appreciate your time and your insight and your experiences. It to me it just seems like such an obvious thing that is going to shift. I mean, two things is that clubs, just needing to be a little bit more in tune with the needs of our teams in
Yep.
general, and that's in all business, but
Mhm.
also the role of women in the
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ed. I've loved being here, so I appreciate it.
All right, we'll talk
Great
again.
chatting. Yeah.
Thank you for listening. If you find episodes like this helpful, be sure to share it and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're using. Until next time, keep crushing your club marketing.